This isn't the best one to start with. It's not Sumo Slammer's classic. It's Sumo Slammer's Hero Generation.
Yeah, I don't really care.
It's a sequel to the original show, but they kinda messed it up. It's like 5 years later and the bad guy, Kenko, has teamed up with the hero, Ishiyama. It's not very realistic, is all I'm saying.
Ben 10 Alien Force is the 2008 sequel to the original Ben 10 series from 2005, and with it came a lot of changes. Not only does it take place after a 5-year time skip where the protagonist is now a 15-year-old teenager, Alien Force also features a slightly different art style, new character designs, new alien transformations, new antagonists, new plot devices, a darker tone, and a few retcons. It's a series that I really enjoyed while I was growing up, but when I think back on it now in the context of the Ben 10 franchise as a whole, I'm starting to realize that not all of those changes were for the best. In my eyes, what works so well about the original Ben 10 cartoon is that it's a power fantasy about an ordinary kid gaining superpowers and using them for good, but also for his personal gain. It's Dial H for Hero, where the superheroes are aliens, and the main character is a flawed protagonist whose arc is about him overcoming his selfishness to become an actual heroic person. Ben Tennyson wants to feel good about his heroics, but what he needs is to learn responsibility, and the entire series is built around that. Ben's Grandpa Max and Cousin Gwen primarily function as character foils that challenge the protagonist in different ways, where Grandpa is supportive and inspires Ben to be responsible, while Gwen is more critical of Ben and isn't afraid to call him out when he screws up. Which also makes it all the more meaningful when Grandpa is the stern one and when Gwen is the encouraging one. It's all about the protagonist learning and growing as a character, sort of as a metaphor for growing up. By contrast, Ben 10 Alien Force takes place 5 years after the original series, where the protagonist has been living without his superpowers until a planet-threatening alien conspiracy inspires him to take them on again. The inciting incident is the disappearance of Grandpa Max, so a new main trio is formed between Ben Tennyson, Cousin Gwen, and former antagonist Kevin Levin. But to be honest, I don't think that the character dynamics here are nearly as functional as in the original series, and I don't really feel like Alien Force is about Ben's character learning to be a better superhero or growing as a person. I feel like it's more invested in the surface level plot and initially frames Ben Tennyson as though he's this perfect hero, which doesn't really give his character any room to work up from. This is evident in Ben's new role as the team leader, as well as his new character design, which trades the short sleeves and scruffy hair he had as a kid for longer sleeves and combed hair to make him look more grown up. However, I feel the need to point out that a 15-year-old still has a ways to go before they're fully matured, and while the art style might look like it's easier to animate, the stiffness of it kind of prevents the characters from showing any emotion besides frowning, smiling, or gasping in surprise, which makes it difficult to really engage with them. The show does eventually give Ben Tennyson more flaws in Season 3, mainly being his overconfidence, which does make sense after having so many victories, and I can understand if the narrative was trying to give him a negative character arc where he keeps getting worse, but if that was the intention, I don't feel like it really came through. While I get that they're trying to make it more like the original series, the fact that they're doing this so late in the game makes me feel like they didn't really have a plan, and the story structure seems kind of backwards. I mean, wouldn't it be more narratively satisfying if Ben 10 had flaws at the start of the story and then progressively got better as it reached the story's ending? The first 2 seasons of Ben 10 Alien Force would make a lot more sense if they were the final seasons of the original Ben 10 cartoon, where the 2 cousins now fully respect each other, and where the main character has finished his character development to become the most heroic version of himself. This is how you end a Ben 10 series, but not how you start a new one. Because if there isn't any more development to guide his character forward, this makes him less interesting to watch, and it even becomes kind of frustrating to see how the early seasons keep putting him on such a pedestal. The very first thing we see Ben Tennyson do as a teenager is help win a soccer game, be voted the MVP by his teammates, and receive a gold medal of all things to prove it. If you really wanted to create a sense of empathy for the character, maybe a more interesting approach would be to go in the opposite direction, where Ben's team actually loses the soccer game and blames him for it, which would reinforce Ben's feelings of inadequacy while centering his arc on the theme of confidence. Ben is already hung up about Grandpa not being present to mentor him, so Alien Force could have easily been about the protagonist overcoming his anxieties and learning to believe in himself. Or, if that's too much like Gurren Lagann and Generator Rex, you could also rewrite the series so that Ben's flaws are present from the beginning of Season 1, where instead of Ben having willingly given up his superpowers before the start of Alien Force, the Omnitrix had been taken away from him as a kid, until he finds it again as a teenager. He can still have at least some amount of character development carried over from the original series, while still being a selfish, not fully mature 15-year-old kid. All that the series really needs to shine is a narrative that is centered around Ben's character growth, and gives him more active decisions that facilitate this. Like when his crush Julie discovers that Ben can turn into aliens, it should be on purpose, because Ben chooses honesty and her safety above his secret identity. But instead she finds out by accident. And when Ben defeats Vilgax by unlocking Diamond Head, it should be set up earlier in the episode, and something that he figures out how to do, not something that happens by coincidence. Also, why isn't Alien X, actually part of the story? You've got this whole thing where the protagonist has to be a voice of reason and deliver a compelling argument in order to use the greatest alien power in the universe, and even though he's of course not able to do this on the first try, I think it would have been a fantastic setup to eventually demonstrate Ben's character growth. When Ben is finally patient and rational enough to use Alien X, it would literally be the apotheosis of his character, and show that he's taken a huge step to becoming a genuine hero. But this never really gets paid off at any of the narrative conclusions. I get that it's supposed to be ironic how the strongest alien in the Omnitrix is also the most difficult to deal with, but what I don't get is how this is framed as being the fault of Alien X's dual consciousness rather than the fault of Ben's impatience or his inability to form a rational argument. To its credit, Alien Force does have some very good moments of active decision making, such as when Ben finds a way to defeat the Hybrid, and when he thwarts Vilgax by telling the Omnitrix to self-destruct, which is a pretty big moment because it's Ben sacrificing his superpowers while stopping the bad guy at the same time. And in my opinion, the Hybrid are actually some of the most effective Ben 10 villains, because they help frame the series as an anti-eugenics narrative, and because they're the exact opposite of Ben's superpowers. While the Omnitrix allows its user to transform into different aliens for the intended purpose of building communication, understanding, and empathy, the Hybrid believe that they are genetically superior to everyone else, with such little empathy for other species that they want to wipe them out of the universe. So while I think that there isn't much of an internal conflict for Ben Tennyson as a character, the external conflicts he faces are actually pretty great. It's not that I actively hate Ben 10 Alien Force. I mean, I'm probably always going to view Swamp Fire as this weird, power-crept version of Heat Blast, my favorite Ben 10 alien, but I do think that Julie is Ben's most positive love interest, that Kevin Levin has the funniest moments in the entire series, and I really enjoy how Alien Force feels like an old science fiction B-movie narrative, what with the series mostly taking place at nighttime, the recurring military base in La Soledad, the Professor Paradox episode, as well as one of the season finales being literally named War of the Worlds. It's just that when it comes to making a Ben 10 series, what I value above these other elements, nostalgic as they may be, is a character-driven narrative that doesn't come across as pretentious. In other words, I'd much rather watch the alternate universe episodes of Ben 10 Omniverse compared to anything from Ben 10 Alien Force or Ben 10 Ultimate Alien, a series that a few of my criticisms can also apply to because it's basically just 3 more seasons of Alien Force. I don't mean any disrespect to Glenn Murakami or the late Dwayne McDuffie, and I don't blame them for Alien Force's shortcomings because making cartoons is a lot harder than it looks. I just wish that the story was more focused on the character development of its protagonist, and this video is basically an outlet for my feelings on that. In my opinion, none of the Ben 10 cartoons are perfect, not even the original series, but after watching so many of them in the same time period, I've learned that there's still a lot of untapped potential in the franchise, and there's still plenty of room to make another Ben 10 sequel, or even another reboot that really explores Ben's growth as a person, that functions as a character study of its flawed protagonist, whether that protagonist is a 10-year-old kid again, a teenager, or even an adult like Ben 10,000. It shouldn't just be about the new alien transformations, Cousin Gwen, Grandpa Max, Kevin Levin, or even the fate of the story's universe. It should be primarily about the story's namesake, Benjamin Kirby Tennyson. Ben 10 Alien Force should have been more about the character of Ben 10.